Warning. The following reading contains subject matter that some listeners might find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised.
The heat finally got to her. Once she had stopped finally crying, she moved slowly out of the burning room. Her only path of exit now was the door that she had originally come in through. She pushed open the surprisingly cool door and walked through, the door closing shut behind her. The cool air struck her coat, causing her whole body to feel a bit more relaxed as her temperature cooled. She wiped her face as she continued to try and regain her composure. Dash's words still had a strong grip on her heart.
I can't stop now. I have to move forward.
She looked into the room at the end of the hallway, expecting to see the pacing nurse again. However, the room wasn't the same one that she had come in from. The room before her was a small square room with a staircase going up before her. Fluttershy blinked at the sight, but the twisting, warping rooms had become something that she was accustomed to by now. She stepped across the room, quickly reaching the staircase. She slowly began her climb upwards, feeling the sense of déjà vu upon the climb. Her hooves nearly slipped on the slick steps as the stench of mildew hit her nose once more. Water dripped down the walls as she felt a sense of dread. Suddenly, as she reached the top of the stairwell, she knew where she was. She was back in the cloud home she had entered when she was first separated from her friends. Only it wasn't a random cloud house anymore. It was her home from when she was a filly. The room she had just entered was the same room that her mother was in when she was young. The same bed sat next to the window so that she could look out. The bookcase that contained the books that she would read in her bed. The bedside table that held her personal belongings, a desk and a chair, a bathroom just a short walk away, everything she'd need for living in her room while she was sick. Fluttershy began to draw towards the bed. A force felt like it was guiding her, telling her to go near it. Her mind felt like a haze flew past it as she stepped back. She saw blood flash before her eyes on the bed and on the carpet, as if her mind was trying to reject these images, but there was no stopping them now. Her head began to ache with pain, but she couldn't stop these memories. Her attention was drawn to the bed, as the memories that she had lost came back in full force, making her remember what happened in that room so long ago.
Mother?
Filly Fluttershy called out, walking into her mother's room. Her mother sat on the bed, a knife in her hoof as if she was playing with it. Her hair was messy, unkempt, and uncared for. Bags were under her bloodshot eyes, as she seemed to be glaring at the knife, as if unhappy with it.
Mother?
Fluttershy whimpered, walking further into the room.
What would you like to eat today?
Her mother suddenly burst out laughing. Fluttershy halted her movements forward, looking up at her mother in shock. The older mare just seemed to have found something funny.
Oh, yes. That'll do nicely.
The older mare smiled once she had finished laughing, turning her head to grin at her daughter. Fluttershy couldn't move, afraid of what her mother was about to do.
Come closer, my daughter.
Her mother said, twisting her body closer to the edge of the bed. Fluttershy began to hesitantly move closer to the bed.
I said, close!
Mother!
Her mother began to yell, but suddenly fell from the bed, hitting the ground with a thud. Fluttershy cried out as she ran to her mother's side, trying to ensure that she was okay. Her mother groaned, but slowly rolled over onto her side, so that she was facing her daughter. Once she was facing Fluttershy, a wicked smile crawled onto her face.
My dearest daughter. Oh, you've come just at the right time. You see, I finally figured it out. I figured out how to cure myself.
Really? Oh, Mother, that's good news. I have to tell Father.
No, you can't tell your father yet.
Why not?
Because only you can administer the treatment right now.
Her mother carefully held the knife up to Fluttershy.
And you'll need this to cure me.
Fluttershy gingerly took the knife into her hooves, staring at it confused.
I'd do it myself, but I'm far too weak to administer the treatment properly. But you... Oh, you can do it just fine. And you want me to be cured, right? Cured and happy?
Of course I do, but what do I...
That's simple, my dear child. You take the knife, and you strike me with it.
Fluttershy froze. That didn't sound right at all. She knew that something as sharp as a knife would hurt when you grazed its edge. Why would striking her mother cure her illness?
But Mother,
Are you questioning me?
No, but...
That sounds like you're questioning me.
Her mother growled. If she could move with any amount of decent strength, she would have lifted her hoof and smacked her daughter.
I need you to do this for me. Only you can do it right now. You do love me, right?
That pulled on Fluttershy's heart.
Of course I do, Mother.
Then strike me.
Fluttershy took a gulp as she shakily raised the knife over her head. She did not want to bring it down. Her mind was screaming at her that doing this was wrong. The knife hovered in the air, unable to strike down.
Fluttershy,
Yes?
you said you loved me, but you haven't struck me with the knife yet. So you lied to me.
No, I do.
Strike me. Love me. You're going to love me.
The knife sailed through the air, embedding itself into her mother's side. Her mother's eyes went wide for a moment before a wicked grin returned.
Yes, yes, yes. Do it again.
Fluttershy pulled the knife out and slammed it back into her mother.
Don't stop.
Were the last words Fluttershy heard from her mother. The knife rose and sank back down into the body before her, again and again. Each strike sent blood flying. Her fur was being coated, and her mane was drenched. Each strike was deafening. Yet it was one of the quietest sounds in the world. It was as if the very knife was screaming at her, but only she could hear the screams of the blade. She plunged the knife in one last time. She panted, she cried, she shook. Her mother wasn't moving anymore. She wasn't speaking. She wasn't breathing. And she wasn't warm anymore. Fluttershy didn't know what this meant. Had she cured her mother like she had asked? Hadn't she put her through an immense amount of pain? Was she going to be all right?
Fluttershy, haven't you gotten that answer from your mother yet?
Her father walked into the room. Fluttershy slowly turned, tears streaming down her face, still holding the knife, covered in her mother's blood, sitting before the corpse of her mother. The air was silent. Then her father drew close.
Father,
Fluttershy hiccuped, trying to say something, anything to explain the sight before her father. However, she was silenced. Her father's hoof struck her hard. Her small body was sent sailing across the room and smashed into the wall. She let out a yelp of pain before hitting the ground. Her father collapsed before her mother as he began to cry.
I killed my mother.
She cried. She couldn't believe that she had done it, but the truth was now before her. All because her mother had yelled at her. Because she had been too weak to disobey her mother. Fluttershy felt her stomach twist. She felt like she was going to be sick. She turned and ran into the bathroom, wanting to escape the room for even a moment. However, her memories assaulted her once again. A vision of memories forgotten flashed before her eyes. There was silence as her father scrubbed away at her coat, washing away the blood that had began to cake onto her fur. The hot water was managing to get most of it away, but some of it was being stubborn. He was being hard with the brush, harder than he had been ever before. Fluttershy didn't speak, though. She couldn't speak up against it. Her heart felt like it was in a million pieces.
Do you know what you've done?
Her father finally asked. Fluttershy whimpered her response. She couldn't say any words.
You took your mother from us. You took the most wonderful mare I'd ever known out of this world. You did it so quickly, too. I sent you in to help her, and you killed her. You are a monster.
Without warning, he pushed her head down under the water. She scrambled for an unexpected moment, her mouth and nose filling with water as air escaped her lungs. Her hooves flailed as she tried to push herself out of the water, but the hoof holding her down was just too strong. The air escaped her quickly, and her lungs began to burn. She reached for air, but it wouldn't come. Suddenly, she was lifted out into the air. Instinctively, she took in a big gasp of air, only for her head to be shoved back under the water. She lost her air almost instantly again, her whole body beginning to feel as if it was burning from the movements. This repeated several times, getting a short breath of air, only to have it painfully taken away by the water once more. Her struggling had lessened, and now she was too weak to push against the water, too tired to try and get air. The hoof was holding her under the water for good now. Her eyes began to roll into the back of her head as her limbs began to stop moving. She couldn't stay awake any longer. She was pulled out of the water. Her body gasped and took in fresh air before coughing out the water that had filled her lungs. She puked slightly, as if her body had tried to reject the water that had attacked her body.
No. Just killing you would be too easy. You need to understand the misery you've caused with your love.
Her father let go of her mane. Fluttershy instinctively caught herself on the edge of the bathtub, still recovering, as her father walked out. Fluttershy shook as she stared at the bathroom. Her father had tried to kill her. He could have killed her, but he didn't, though she felt like she had deserved it at that moment. She had murdered her mother in cold blood. Death sounded exactly like what she deserved. She backed out of the bathroom slowly. She didn't want to be in that room anymore. She turned to the door to the hallway and quickly exited. She panted heavily outside of her mother's bedroom as her tears refused to stop. She slowly hobbled forward, having difficulty even seeing where she was going. She reached a hoof up, touching what felt like a door. Without thinking, she pushed it open, stepping inside.
So, you sewed it back together, huh?
Her father said, looking at the sloppy sewing job his daughter had done to her favorite doll.
Yes, sir.
Fluttershy meekly replied, lowering her head as her father held it. He wasn't impressed at all. All the stitches were visible, the stuffing was still hanging out of spots, not sewn close enough, and all the fibers would easily come loose if tugged on.
Unacceptable.
He said as he grabbed the doll and tore it apart limb for limb. Fluttershy snapped her head up to watch in shock. He tore apart all the seams and stitches. She had worked so hard to make that doll one piece again after he had torn it up the first time. Soon, the doll lay in pieces of cloth and stuffing before her again.
If you love it, I shall destroy it. Then it will be your job to put it back together. And if you can't do it perfectly, then you don't deserve it at all.
He walked over to his bookcase. Fluttershy whimpered as she began to pick up the pieces of her favorite, most beloved doll, her doll Ashley. A book slammed itself before her, making Fluttershy almost jump, but she read the title carefully, The Mastery of Sewing.
If you don't want to see your doll destroyed, you will make it look perfect.
Her father said before returning to his desk, going back to his work. Once she had all the pieces of her doll, Fluttershy carefully picked the book up with her mouth, careful not to stain it with her tears, as she quickly left her father's study. Fluttershy whimpered. She was in her father's study. She had wandered in there by accident, but now she had seen more of what she had forgotten. She swallowed back more tears as she began to calm herself down. Her mind began to put things together.
I wanted to see this.
She breathed heavily, reminding herself that she had chosen to come here. But she had told herself that there was no turning back now.
I have to see every memory for my sake.
She took a deep breath as she wiped her face of tears before pushing back on the door of her father's study, exiting it. She stumbled out of the study a little, finding the kitchen that lay just on the opposite side of it. She steadied herself before walking into the kitchen. The haze returned as another memory surfaced.
What do you think you're doing?
Her father bellowed. Fluttershy dropped the cereal box that she had picked up from the top shelf of the counter. Her wings snapped shut to her sides as she fell a few feet before landing on the ground with a thud. Her father was furious. As he stormed up to her, Fluttershy tried to turn away out of fear. He grabbed her hoof and forced her to eye level with him.
What have I told you about flying without permission? You're not allowed to do it even in the house!
I'm sorry.
She cried out as tears streamed from her face. Her hoof began to ache as he gripped it harder.
I told you before, bad fillies who don't listen to what they're told get eaten by dragons. Do you want to get eaten by a dragon?
No!
Well, you're attracting a dragon by flying as a bad filly. You must want to be eaten by a dragon. Why else would you be flying without permission?
No, I don't want to get eaten by a dragon. I'm sorry.
Well, you know what? I think I can hear a dragon. He's already pretty close because you've flown. Maybe I should just throw you outside so he can eat you right now.
No, Daddy, please. I don't want to be eaten.
Well, if you don't want to be eaten, then there's only one thing I can do.
He said, tossing his daughter to the ground. The wind escaped her body as she tried to scramble to her feet, only to have her father's hoof step on her to hold her down. His mouth reached down, gripping down hard on her wing, forcibly extending it, despite all of her efforts to shut it.
No, Daddy, please, stop!
She cried as the pain shot through her back, but it was too late. He wasn't going to stop. Fluttershy cried louder than she ever had before as her father snapped her wing.
There. Now you won't be flying for a while, and you won't attract any dragons.
He simply said, stepping off of his wailing daughter.
I snapped it carefully. You'll be able to fly once it's healed, but we'll have to get you to the hospital to put a cast on it.
He said, a grin formed on his face.
Though, only once the dragon has left.
Fluttershy barely heard her father's words past her own screams of agony from the burning pain that echoed from her wing. Fluttershy gulped down more tears, trying to hold herself back from crying. She slowly backed out of the kitchen.
My father, he was cruel.
Fluttershy whimpered softly to herself.
I can't believe that I made myself forget about all this. It's all painful to remember.
She shut her eyes, another tear escaping, despite trying to force herself not to cry. She struggled with her hooves to make herself continue forward. Past the kitchen was the living room. She could see the front door from there. She knew that was where she needed to head. Her instincts told her so. However, the living room held one more memory that she had to see. The haze returned as the memory came to her once more.
Where did you get that?
Her father asked as Filly Fluttershy walked through the door, carrying a candy bar in her mouth.
Colt at school gave it to me. He said he liked me and wanted me to have it.
She said, gently chewing on the end of the bar, savoring the sweet taste.
Oh, he did he?
Her father said, walking up to Fluttershy. She looked up at her father, taking a step back from him, getting closer. Fluttershy felt the ground as her father's hoof hit hard across her face. The candy bar slid across the room.
Let me tell you something about boys loving you.
He growled, grabbing Fluttershy by the mane and picking her up, eliciting yelps of pain from the filly.
Colts will only hurt you. They only think of themselves, and they want nothing more than to see you suffer. After all, look at me. I love you, and here I am, hurting you.
He said before tossing his daughter across the room, her landing hard against the floor. Fluttershy cried as she tried to curl up into a ball, not wanting to be hurt anymore.
But I suppose you must really like being hurt if you're going to let a colt like you.
Without any warning, he kicked into her back, causing her to cry out in pain.
Any colt that gets close to you will do nothing but hurt you. So I hope you enjoy this for the rest of your life. I'm sure you'll find a colt who loves you even more than I do.
Her father laughed before walking off into his study. Fluttershy whimpered and cried where she curled up, remembering the colt from school that had given her the candy bar. Suddenly, her mind was filled with anger, hate for the colt that had given her that candy bar. All he wanted to do was hurt her. He wanted to get close to her so that he could make her cry and suffer, just like her father did.
I hate colts.
Fluttershy vowed to herself that she would never like a colt or let a colt like her for as long as she lived. Another lump came to Fluttershy's throat.
My father, he made me hate colts.
She thought to herself.
But I don't hate them.
She knew better now. Not all colts were like her father. Not all of them would hurt her just because she got close to them. But she still never had any interest in being with a colt. The only pony she had fallen in love with was Rainbow Dash.
Do I love Rainbow Dash for her? Or because she was the only pony who got close to me that didn't hurt me?
Fluttershy found herself confused by her feelings now. Everything that she had believed had been turned upside down in a single moment. It felt like she had just been lying to herself all this time, and that everything that she had done might have been a mistake.
No.
She suddenly said firmly to herself.
Because of Rainbow Dash, I came to Ponyville. I escaped from my father. I met the best friends I ever had. Friends who care about me more than anything else. I fell in love and I had a wonderful relationship.
She said, looking up at the ceiling, as thoughts of her friends came to mind. She remembered so many wonderful moments together with her friends. Picking flowers, going to parties, playing games, sleepovers, tea parties, hanging out, adventuring. She had done so much with her life now, even though she had forgotten about her foalhood because it was so painful. It hadn't stopped her from moving on with her life, from experiencing all the wonders life had to offer. If anything, because her father pushed her away, she found her way into the embrace of ponies that truly loved her. She took a deep breath as she calmed down. A small smile formed on her face.
Yes, even though all this happened, I still have my friends.
She said, a warmth sparking inside of her heart. It gave her legs strength. She walked through the living room up to the front door of the house. She could see the lock on the door, the lock with the symbol of a doll on it. She carefully reached into her bag and pulled out the key with the doll symbol on it, the key that she had picked up a while ago and still had. She carefully placed the key into the lock, the door letting out a click to let her know that it had worked. She carefully pushed the door open and walked through the door. On the other side was a large open room, almost like a small gymnasium. She walked forward to the middle of the room and then stopped. The black fire was burning on the opposite side of the court. The fire slowly grew, rising up into the shape of a pony. Red eyes appeared on its face, a white mouth opening. It was the dark creature. Fluttershy stared at the creature. She didn't feel any heavy, overbearing presence this time. The creature was still drawing out fear from her heart, but it wasn't overwhelming her now. She could just stand before the creature now. The creature slowly turned itself around, showing its back to Fluttershy. Fluttershy looked at the creature curiously, not sure what it was doing. Then, as it turned around, she saw what was hanging from its mouth. The body of Rainbow Dash. Fluttershy let out a gasp as the creature flicked its head, tossing the body towards Fluttershy. It landed right before her, hitting the ground with a thud. Fluttershy reached a hoof out and gently nudged the body. It was cold. Rainbow Dash was dead, killed by the creature before her. Fluttershy stared at the body for a long while, the creature watching her, grinning as it waited. Fluttershy moved her hoof away from the body, a sad look appearing on her face. She turned her head upwards to look at the dark creature.
Father, I understand now. I've done a horrible thing, and it's likely that I can never be forgiven for what I've done. I cannot bring the dead back to life, and the blood of my mother is on my hooves.
She closed her eye for a moment, taking a deep breath, before she continued.
I probably deserved all the punishments I received. No fool should ever do what I did. Though it may have been tough living with what I did and receiving the punishments for my deed, I lived with everything.
She smiled softly.
And I've grown up to have a wonderful life now. I've left behind all the things that made me sad, that hurt me, that made me miserable living at home. I have wonderful friends, animals that depend on me, a home I take care of myself. I found love that didn't hurt me.
Fluttershy carefully stepped over the body before her, approaching the dark creature. The smile of the creature faded as it glowered down at her. It was not amused. Fluttershy came to stand just inches before him, looking up at him, smiling.
You brought a lot of pain to me, but I forgive you.
She leaned in and nuzzled the chest of the dark creature.
I forgive you for everything, and I thank you. Thank you for letting me find a wonderful life.
An orb of white bright light appeared in the air above the two, floating down towards Fluttershy. The dark creature roared out in pain as the light gently floated past him, reaching Fluttershy's chest. The light engulfed her body, filling her with a pleasant warmth. The bandages that covered her body began to unfurl. Each bandage was pulled away from her body, pulling around her as her body recovered. Her wings extended out. She stood on all of her legs. She opened both of her eyes to look up at the roaring dark creature, which seemed to be fading away as the light shined. The very existence of this creature seemed to be fading away now, burning up in the bright light that surrounded her. The last bits of darkness that made up the creature disappeared. As the light began to slowly fade, Fluttershy smiled softly as she looked down, seeing that on her chest, in the place of the lantern, was now a golden-shaped necklace with a pink butterfly-shaped jewel. Her necklace glowed once more, a beam of light shooting out, creating a doorway of light before her. Fluttershy looked at the doorway of light, knowing what it was. Once she passed through that archway of light, she would leave this world. She would go back to Ponyville. She'd be able to take everything that she learned and live a better life than she had before.
I can't leave just yet.
She smiled at the doorway before turning around and running away from the light.
I have 2 friends who are lost and need my help.
Pinkie Pie laid on the ground, panting in pain and exhaustion.
You've been running away oh so well. You're very good at it.
The other Pinkie grinned.
You've killed me 3 times, and yet here I am again. You must really want to be part of my parties.
Pinkie Pie could only sob. This other Pinkie wanted to kill, and she couldn't stop her. What was the point of her even trying to stop her? She let Fluttershy get separated twice now. She was probably dead with how injured she'd become, and Rainbow Dash hated her now. What was the point of trying to stop her other self from killing when she was just as guilty of it herself?
I'm sorry, Bellomina.
Pinkie sobbed, closing her eyes.
Oh, well, I guess I'll just have to take my time playing with you.
The other Pinkie smiled, picking up her butcher's knife as she drew closer.
Now, just hold it right there for 1 minute.
Came a motherly demand. Pinkie Pie and the other Pinkie snapped their heads to the doorway to the room that they were in. There stood a yellow Pegasus pony with long pink hair, wearing a golden necklace.
Hasn't your mother ever told you it's not nice to hurt other ponies?
Fluttershy stumped across the room towards the other Pinkie. Pinkie Pie just stared with her mouth agape.
Well, yeah, but I'm not really hurting them. I'm playing with them.
The other Pinkie laughed, putting down her butcher's knife to talk to Fluttershy.
That's not how you play nice with other ponies.
Fluttershy stood right up to the other Pinkie, looking her straight in the eyes.
You were going to seriously hurt my friend. You don't use knives or sharp objects when you play. You play nice games, like pin the tail on the pony or bobbing for apples. You should know better than this. But no buts! You should be ashamed of yourself. I have half the mind to tell your mother what kind of games you've been playing with other ponies.
The other Pinkie seemed to shrink back under the scowling of Fluttershy.
Now, you're going to take your little things and get rid of them. And I never want to catch you doing this again. You got that?
The other Pinkie could only nervously nod her head rapidly before picking up her butcher knife and turning, running away from Fluttershy.
That's a good second, Pinkie Pie.
Fluttershy smiled happily, seeing the other Pinkie run off, before turning to the Pinkie Pie who was staring in shock at her.
How was that? I was so assertive.
Fluttershy softly chuckled as she felt a happy shiver go down her back. Pinkie Pie stared, her mouth agape. It took a long time for her to even register what was going on, but once it dawned on her that Fluttershy had just scared her other self away, a smile formed on her face. It quickly began to grow, and not before long, a sound escaped her lips. Pinkie Pie began to laugh. She laughed so hard, rolling over onto her back as her hooves flailed in the air. Fluttershy had scared the very thing that scared her to the core, and she had done it by just being Fluttershy. Pinkie Pie couldn't help but laugh, as her hair poofed out to its usual curls. It was one of the funniest things she had ever seen.
Thank you.
Fluttershy said, smiling, giving a small bow to Pinkie Pie, accepting the laugh as a compliment.
Oh, Fluttershy!
Pinkie laughed, finally rolling back onto her hooves and rushing up, hugging her friend dearly.
Hey, what are friends for?
Fluttershy grinned, returning the hug.
Oh, speaking of friends, have you seen Rainbow Dash?
Pinkie said, looking at Fluttershy with concern again.
Don't worry, I found you first, but we're not leaving till we find her. Right! Operation Locate Dashy is a go!
It really is for the best.
A cold voice said, "Yeah, it's what I've always wanted after all." Rainbow Dash tilted her head, closing her eyes as she agreed.
I'm glad to see you've been able to follow your true heart then.
The voice laughed. Rainbow Dash opened her eyes to look at the pony that stood before her. She looked like one of the Shadow Bolts, the flying team that she had seen in the Everfree Forest the day that they had taken down Nightmare Moon.
It's what I've always done. No point in changing that now,
Rainbow said, slowly glancing around. The two of them were sitting in the middle of the burning building, the fire staying just far away enough to not burn them.
Good. Then just take my hoof, and everything will be made clear.
Rainbow Dash looked at the hoof hesitantly. It didn't feel right. It didn't feel like it was something that she was supposed to do, but she felt like it was the only thing she could do anymore. She slowly raised her hoof, reaching out to carefully take the Shadow Bolt's hoof.
Dashi!
Came an instantly cheerful voice. Suddenly, Rainbow Dash was tackled from behind, flattening her against the ground. The Shadow Bolt gasped loudly.
What the? Hey! Pinkie!
Rainbow shouted, annoyed, still being embraced by the pink mare.
Oh my gosh, I thought I'd lost you! After you ran off, I was so worried, and I tried to find you on Fluttershy, only I started running into the monsters I ran into before. Oh man, I was so depressed because of what you said, and I couldn't help it. I started to relive the nightmare here. But that's okay now, because I forgive you, and now I found you again.
Yeah, that's great, Pinkie, but you're crushing me!
Rainbow groaned as she tried to sit up, Pinkie finally sliding off of her.
Oopsie. Sorry about that.
What are you doing here anyway? I told you we're supposed to be looking for Flutter.
Rainbow stopped herself as her eyes went wide.
Fluttershy! What am I doing here? I have to find Fluttershy!
It's okay, Dash. I'm already here.
Fluttershy smiled happily, walking into the burning room from the hallway Pinkie had just ran through at blinding speeds.
Fluttershy! Oh, thanks Celestia, you're okay!
Rainbow said, galloping over and embracing Fluttershy.
What was I thinking? You were right in front of me not too long ago, and I completely forgot I had to protect you.
It's okay, Dash. This place does weird things to a pony.
Hey!
The Shadow Bolt yelled, standing up, glaring at the three mares before her. All three turned their heads to return her gaze.
What about your dreams? You won't accomplish them if you don't come with me!
Dash looked at Fluttershy. Fluttershy smiled back at her, before Rainbow Dash grinned and turned back to the Shadow Bolt.
Keep it for now. I'll find a way to achieve my dream on my own.
No!
The Shadow Bolt yelled, before turning into a puff of black smoke and disappearing into the burning building.
And don't come back!
Pinkie yelled happily, waving at the puff of black smoke.
Fluttershy, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have let this place get to my head and forget about protecting you. And Pinkie, I'm sorry I yelled at you. It wasn't right of me when you were just trying to help.
That's okay, Dashi. I forgive you.
Pinkie said, giving Rainbow another hug.
Let's just focus on getting out of here. I can handle that.
Fluttershy turned herself towards the hallway and stood proudly. Her golden necklace began to softly glow before releasing a beam of light that shot out before them. The doorway of light formed, their exit home. The necklace around Fluttershy's neck, having served its purpose, turned back into an orb, floating up into the air before disappearing.
All right, let's go home.
Yeah, I'm kind of tired of this place.
All of us are.
The three mares walked through the door of light together.